So I really want you to think about the day that you were first diagnosed and what that felt like. Maybe you were in the hospital, maybe you were in a clinic. For some of you, this was probably many, many years ago. In fact, I really love the buttons that have been circulating. I know some of you are very recently diagnosed, but how many of you out there were diagnosed maybe 5, 10 plus years? Yeah, it's an amazing testament to A, that you're still engaged in this community, and B, that the medical therapy has been what it is. But I want you to think about the day of your diagnosis, and I want you to think about your journey that got you to that day when a doctor told you you have vasculitis, and that's probably the last thing you heard that day, as everything else just washed over you. Some of you probably took weeks, months, some of you years, and I recognize some of you are still struggling to actually find that diagnosis. I'm sure maybe some of you had an experience with doctors where you saw one doctor, they looked at that particular organ system, you saw another doctor, they looked at this particular organ system, and it finally took somebody to take a step back and put the whole picture together before you had your diagnosis. And a lot of that is because it's hard to make these diagnoses, and they require a good amount of experience because there's a lot of pattern recognition to it, and every patient is variable. And what we need is to use research tools to help facilitate diagnosis. I know that most of you have had the experience of, well, we don't really know what to call you, but it doesn't really matter because the treatments are all the same. That may be true, but I recognize how disconcerting that is to hear. So let's say that you have gotten past the diagnosis, and now we're starting to talk about treatment. And I think we should all be very grateful for the last 2-3 decades of work, particularly of randomized clinical trials that have revolutionized the field and changed the outlook for patients with these diseases. These diseases, many of them were frequently fatal, and now they're a chronically manageable condition, in part because of well-conducted clinical trials, because the organization and the efforts of many people who are here today, who have trained me, myself, and the next generation of physicians studying these diseases. So you've gotten through your diagnosis, and you're talking about you made your treatment plan, you got put into remission, and now it's, how do I keep this disease from coming back? And this is the question that we're hearing constantly, right? And it's also a testament to how well we're doing. For most of you, the expectation is to get your disease under control with the available therapies. And that's a wonderful situation to be in. But now it's, okay, what do I do? How do I keep this disease from coming back? And I tend to think about that in a couple of ways. The fact that these are diseases that do relapse in a number of patients, the fact that we tell you as your physicians, your relapse risk never fully goes away, you always have to be vigilant, live your life, do what you want to do, obtain your dreams, but you just have to be mindful of it and report, have a low threshold to report back to us. What that says to me is that in many ways the disease may not exactly have completely gone away, that it's just somewhat lurking there. The immunology that was off kilter that predisposed you to the disease is still present. Maybe there's another hit that needs to get added on to stimulate things. And so what we need to do, I think, as researchers is really focus on remission. We do a lot of study when you are active, when the disease is floridly active and we're trying to learn about the inflammation of it. But I think we need to pay equal attention to the times when you're doing well. And that requires us to look carefully during those times, but it also requires us to have long-term follow-up with you so we can see what happens in the future. Those studies take a lot of time and effort and dedication. It's very hard when you're doing research to do long-term outcome studies because it's hard to keep the patients engaged to stick around long enough to see what you need to see over time. If you want to keep the disease from coming back, you got to be able to predict the future. And in order to do that, you have to watch patients for a period of time. So keeping you engaged, I love the fact that there's 10 years plus here. That's an amazing thing, and I think that will facilitate the research, the kind of research that we need to do to answer the pressing questions that are here now. And the biggest one is, can we get this disease from coming back and can we cure it?